Booze and boards, boards and booze. Bad guys at large, it's bad news. No beer this time, so we won't lose. We found their lair, they'll pay their dues. The town is saved, so now we booze. Booze and boards, boards and booze. With Mickey and Jeb.
Please don't say something stupid. I know you're thinking of something.
We are the champions, my friends.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. We've got Marvel champions here.
I'm sorry that you have to listen to Jeb. I know, for all our massive amount of fans we have.
Almost 800.
Almost.
Yep.
Alright.
They get to hear my horrible voice.
No, please don't. Please don't. Okay, so like Jeb said, today's episode is going to be Marvel Champions. It's got a lot of hype when it was announced. I think it was demoed at Gen Con, I think.
Yeah, I believe so.
Anyways, FFG, one of their living card games. It is a co-op game similar to Arkham Horror, Lord of the Rings, except they now have the Marvel license to play around with. So, Jeb and I, both being fans of the characters, we were pretty excited.
And then we heard it was co-op, and we were like, hey.
Yeah, exactly. And then the whole living card game, and seeing is we were hoping that they were going to hit another home run, well, at least in our opinion, like they did with Arkham, because if you guys have watched that video that we did, you know that we really like it, even though we get pummeled every time we play. But it's still way up there. I mean, it's probably, I know for me, I'm assuming Jeb too, is top 5 game for me anyways, because it gets played a lot, and it's just good. Thematically, it just... Yep. I mean, the way they make it feel different and stuff like that. So that's what we were hoping for when, you know, they talked about this. They have done some things a little different. I don't know if you think we should talk about that now or in the review. Where do you think that goes better?
Yeah, I guess we can talk about it now.
Okay, so unlike... Have a beer.
Okay.
Fool. Okay, so unlike some of their other living card games, like Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror, they did things a little bit different. So, for instance, when the packs come out, they're either a hero pack, which includes the hero and a bunch of new cards for the hero, and that you can mix with the traits and things like that.
Do you know if that's hero specific, or do they throw in like some of those like leadership cards or whatever that?
Well, that's what
I would think
that's
how
because that's how they're gonna build your card pool for those, is through the hero packs, and then they have the villain / scenario packs, which add somebody new for you to fight, plus new scenarios. They're as of this recording, the first hero packs and the first villain packs have not yet been released. I believe it's supposed to be December 20th. So I don't know. I think Covenant and stuff's already seen them. They've got to play them because they're bigger than us. They're not better, but they're bigger. Maybe they are better. I don't know. You be the judge. I mean, they have a Marvel Champions teaching thing, and we think we can do better.
But they don't have a guy who can make funny voices.
Yeah, they probably do, but he chooses not to because he knows it's stupid. Anyways, so that being said, so they have the hero packs, and then they have the villain scenario packs. And what they're also going to do is they're going to release... so if you know anything about the FFG things, when they start like a new cycle, they come out with a box. It's not as big as this, but it's bigger. It's deluxe. Well, these are going to be called story boxes, which is going to be their version of a campaign scenario. So they really kind of took things that worked well from their other living card games, and they kind of like said, here's how we're going to do it in this one, and make it its own entity, so to speak. And we were excited about all that all that stuff, because not having to do a scenario every time is really cool, and just being able to sit down and play, where the past two have always been you're playing some sort of story. However, they kept the option to do a story, and also with the way they did, like, just the villains in the core box, it kind of feels like you're getting a little bit of a scenario, just if you switch villains or switch the what, I forget what they call the side things in them. That kind of mixes it up a little bit.
Yeah, and like with Arkham, you kind of have to buy each of the packs in the cycle to continue the story. Right. But like Mickey said, since you have all your campaign stuff separate from heroes, it's like, well, I don't really like that superhero, so I don't want to have to spend the money on something that I'm not going to use. So you can sidestep that hero or sidestep the villain. But I mean, usually the villain scenario, you're like, I want to fight them because it's something new to fight. But
if you're not into the campaign things, and also like their other ones, you can play this solo too. So, but they've done that with the other two that we mentioned. So anyways, I don't have very much else to say about like the concept of the game, and Jeb's going to go over the stats, or whatever you want to call them.
It's 14 and up, which I think...
Probably a little bit lower.
Yeah, 1 to 4 players, like Mickey said, you could solo. I don't think you can actually do 4 players with the core, right? You can only do... Oh, you can? It depends on who...
Yeah, you can do all 4, but you can't do the same trait.
Gotcha.
Which if you don't know what a trait is yet, you'll be able to see it in this. Also, keep in mind that if you do that, and I could be speaking wrong too. It might be only 2, because the example in the rule book is the 2 heroes that they basically have set up.
Well, that's what I had assumed was.
But so. If I am wrong, one of the other nice things that we forgot to mention is this is all you need. They gave you a full play set of all the cards. Now, you can't get a full play set to deck build 2 people out of the same box.
Right, but at least you can deck build yourself.
But you can build 2 people starter decks right out of the box, and then you can build your own deck with the maximum amount of cards that are allowed, and you don't have to buy another one, which is, thank goodness they finally did that, because that used to piss everybody off, and it was, I mean...
Especially when they, like, in the core, it would be like, here's 3 copies of something, here's 2 copies, and then here's 1 copy, and it's like, well, the 1 copy one you have is going to be, like, the really good one, so you got to buy 3, and it's like...
Yeah, they did that actually, where you needed to buy 3 with Lord of the Rings, I think. Yeah. I think Jeb and I only went to 2 because we ended up playing. We just picked our colors, and then we were like, when we bought the second box, we were like, here, you keep those on the color you're playing, and then the other person kept their main colors, and we just said whatever with the rest of them. So. That's kind of how we did that. We were so glad to hear that with this. So, anything else?
That's all I can think of right now. We will do the components, how to play. It'll be a 2-player game, me and Mickey co-op against Ultron. So if you know anything about it, out of the box, it wants you to fight Rhino.
Yep.
And we figured most people will show that, so we were like, let's just go with Ultron.
Yeah, we've been trying to do that lately with some of the things, because either A, we're a little bit behind everybody else, because we never get anything in advance. So it's... And then we also figured, exactly like Jeb said, we figure everybody's probably going to do the basic things. So we still go all over the basic mechanics, but we've been trying to run, in this type of a game, a different scenario. And even some of the board games, if they have, a stepped up, like, oh, here's the alternate side. We've been trying to do things like that, so you guys maybe can see an introductory video that's not as basic as some of the other ones. I don't know. Seems nobody seems to complain about it, so whatever.
And
Nope.
then we'll have the review at the end. So.
Yeah, we'll have the review at that.
All right, so
And
let's get to it. All right, so we're back with components. We'll go through quickly all the components of the game. The first thing are the different types of cards that you have in the game. So let's start with the hero cards. You've got the hero personality card, or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And then all the associated cards that go with him.
And notice the symbol of the hero is down in the corner for easy sorting. So those are mandatory in the hero deck.
Yep.
And
the last thing is an obligation card,
which is going to go in the bad guy deck. You can notice the different back of the card.
And then there is also a, what is it called, a nemesis kind of deck that goes with each hero. So Spider-Man's nemesis is
Vulture.
Vulture. So you've got, there's a side scheme, Vulture himself, and then I think 3 cards that get shuffled into the...
They get put into the villain deck.
Yeah. So all of that, it comes with each hero.
Yep. So that is all related to a Spider-Man, and you need all of that if you're going to play Spider-Man. They did do a really good job of being able to find these things. I mean, I won't say that it's, once they're mixed up, it's like not any hassle. It's a little bit, but no worse than any other deck
Right,
builder.
they're labeled enough that you can,
Right.
looking at them, you can find it. But
Yeah.
some other games are not that easy.
Right.
All right, so we showed you all of the specific cards to Spider-Man, but that's not everything that gets put into the Spider-Man deck, or the hero deck. The next thing that you would add are the, I think they're just called basic cards.
So you have access to basic cards, which have a gray border.
Yep.
And
Oh, go ahead.
And then you also have access to what's called a trait. And when you're building your decks, you are allowed to pick one trait. And you can have any cards from that trait, but you can't mix traits. At least as of yet, I wouldn't be surprised if some hero comes out and can have X amount of another trait. But as of right now, the basic deck building rules are one trait, as many basics as you want, and
Whatever
3
hero.
copies of a card unless the card is limited or unique.
And all the hero cards.
Right, and all the hero cards are a must.
Yes.
Yeah,
So you can't have just the Spider-Man card and throw in other people's...
Exactly. So that's what's going to comprise your hero deck, and in the back of the rule book, or the how to play book, has a list of all the core set heroes and how to build a right out of the box basic deck, and then you can explore the deck building that I just briefly mentioned when once you're used to the game.
So next up is the villain deck, or villain cards, I guess. So you're going to have the villain that you're fighting for the scenario. So we have Rhino, and there's 3 Rhino cards, and in the top right there is a number that shows which level he is. And then there is his main scheme. And then the rest of the Rhino cards. And actually,
All say Rhino down there.
Yep. So that's all Rhino specific cards.
Yep.
And then other things that are going to be put into the villain deck are the standard villain cards, which they just say standard in the bottom left. And then there is, I guess, kind of like a side scheme that you have to include, and you can choose from multiple different ones that are included. And I think the core game says Bomb Scare is the one that you should include.
It says exactly what they're called, and if you go to the very back, here, let me see. Jeb, I would like to correct you right now. The cards that you are mentioning are called encounter sets.
Not side schemes?
No, they have side
random
schemes.
side schemes?
They have side schemes in them, Jeb, but they are encounter sets.
Okay, so the encounter set that we are encountering in this set is Bomb Scare. So We just grabbed all the cards that say Bomb Scare on the bottom.
Okay.
And I think that includes just one side scheme and a bunch of other cards that...
Random cards.
Yeah.
Just FYI real quick, it go over it again in setup, but that is a basic game, and then 2 and 3 is a difficult game. That's how you use those.
I don't think there's any 1, 2, 3, but I'm sure somebody
But he's
online
gonna
has tried it. And then another thing is those standard villain cards. There is a few expert cards that are included in the core set, and they say that you can just shuffle those in if you want to play.
So there's 3 extra ones that say expert of these that you can put in if you want to.
Yeah. All right, and closing out the cards are the status cards. So we got 3 statuses in this game
So far.
Yeah.
So we have stunned, confused, and tough, and other cards in the game will tell you when those come out.
All right, so let's go on to the different kind of tokens that are in the game. So the one that's in almost every game are damage tokens. And these don't look like hearts or blood drops or anything. They're just...
numbers.
Yep. And
those are your damage tokens.
There are threat tokens, which are triangles with numbers on them. And then we got all-purpose counters, which are green squares with numbers on them. And then we've got acceleration tokens, which are
+1s,
little house shapes, rhombuses. No, I don't know if that's a rhombus or.
Oh my gosh!
And then the first player token, which I really like because you can put it next to your hero and it looks like they're going ah. I mean that's the noise that 3 exclamation marks is.
Oh my gosh!
All right. And then we've got the different hit dials. There are hit point dials for the heroes, which are the small ones.
And you get 4 of those in the box.
Yep. And then the hit point dial for the villain, which is the larger one.
The big one. And it goes up really high. Look. That's at 190 people. And then last but not least, your cheat sheet. See, I said that before Jeb could make a dumb comment.
And then they are double-sided with the opposite color and phase. So.
Yes, people, I am not a magician.
All right, and I think that's everything for components, right? All right, so we're going to go over setup now. The first thing you're going to do for setup is select your heroes. And when you select your hero, you're going to find their identity card and place it alter ego side face up.
We are going to set up one hero for you, and just so you kind of know what's happening. And we are going to play a 2-player game, so.
Next, you're going to grab the hit point dial and set the hit points equal to what it says on the bottom of the alter ego.
And Peter Parker says 10.
Yep. Then you are going to select the first player as a group, and since it's only one player, guess who's going to be first?
So stupid.
Next, you're going to set aside the obligations of each hero.
So it says obligation right there, and this is Spider-Man's obligation, and it's an eviction notice. So this is gonna set aside. Can you see that, Jeb, on the camera? Can you see that, Jeb?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Next, you're going to set aside the nemesis cards for that hero, which Peter Parker's nemesis is
the Vulture.
Venom. I mean, the Vulture.
Alright, so since I know where these are going to go, this is actually going to stay by your character. This one's going to end up going into the villain deck. So this one's going to stay beside you. This one's going to end up getting shuffled in.
Yep. Next, you are going to shuffle all player decks. So the player deck is going to consist of all of the Spider-Man cards, or the hero that you picked. So in this case, Spider-Man cards, the basic cards, and the, what is the name of those? Traits? The trait cards.
So I'm just going to, I'm not going to shuffle all these together, but here's kind of like, and this is not exactly what it's supposed to look like. in terms of what is built in the rule book, but at least you can see a stack of cards. So, and I'm not going to shuffle them because I want to undo that.
Well, you can flip it over so it looks like a deck, though.
Yeah. All right. Good idea, Jeb.
I got one a day.
Yeah.
Next,
or less.
next, you're going to collect all the tokens and status cards and kind of put them off to the side in a pool. Which
You don't need to see that.
Yep.
You guys know how to set aside tokens and status things. Come on, people.
Alright, so that's everything for the heroes setting up. So now we're moving on to setting up the villain. So the first thing is select the villain.
Alright, so we got Rhino, Jeb, Rhino.
Okay, and you are going to, I guess, decide if you're going to play the easy or the hard mode.
We're going to play easy.
And for easy, you are going to pick the 1 and 2 cards.
1 and 2.
Put the number 3 Rhino in the box or whatever.
Yep, set him out of the game.
And then you're going to stack the Rhino so that Rhino 1 is on top of Rhino 2. So you don't see Rhino 2 yet. Alright, next you are going to set the villain's hit points. So, much like the hero, the hit points on the villain is on the bottom, except the villain has hit points equal to something times the number of players.
Right, so there is a little person symbol by the number, and I can't read the number, Jeb. Help me out.
14.
And since we're going to play 2 players, keep in mind that we're not going to play Rhino, but this is how it works. There's 14, 2 players. That means his starting hit points are going to be at 14 times 2, 28. So we just set his dial and put it under, over, wherever you like. We're going to put it.
It's off screen, but
we're going to put it under then.
It doesn't matter that much. So next you're going to grab the main scheme of Rhino, which is the break-in. And you're going to put it on its 1A side. So what you're going to do is resolve any setup instructions on the main scheme.
It's 1A.
So 1A, it kind of tells you the contents and the setup of the scenario. So the contents just list the Rhino cards,
right,
and some standard cards, and 1 modular encounter set, which recommended bomb scare.
Right.
And then setup says advance to stage 1B. So we're going to flip this over.
So basically he has no setup extras.
And then just you would read the text on the 1B side
and
to see if anything's active in the beginning.
And 1B in Rhino's case just says when he
maxes out the scheme.
when he completes that scheme, he wins.
Yep. So the next thing you're going to do is create and shuffle the encounter deck. So you are going to take all of the Rhino cards.
All the Rhino cards.
You're going to take all of the standard villain cards.
Standard villain cards.
And you're going to take your encounter set. Is that what it was called?
Yes, and the encounter set, which they recommended bomb scare.
Right.
These are the reason that, if you didn't catch it, Jeb said earlier, the module encounter set is because these can swap out. These can swap out. These are always in. Just so you know, the way you can tell, they are villain because they're yellow on the back, and they do say standard down here. The Rhino says Rhino 1 of something, 2 of something, 18 of something.
Standard
just says standard, right? And well, I mean, it has the 1 ofs, but
yeah.
The point is that it says standard. It doesn't have a name, and the module encounter sets also have a name of what the set is, so it makes sorting a little bit easier. But that's how you identify these, because they're all going to get shuffled together, and if you want to take it apart, you need to know what the identifiers are.
Yep. And then the last thing that you're going to add to the villain deck is the obligation card. So we had set aside 1 obligation card for Peter Parker because he's the only hero.
Right.
So all 4 of those piles are going to get shuffled together.
This, and shuffle, 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 shuffle. And then just set up the encounter deck right by the villain.
And one thing to note is if you were playing expert mode, you would shuffle in the expert cards
Right.
At this point. Next, you are going to, well, I guess that's it for the villain setup. So the next thing you're going to do is draw cards. So each player is going to draw a number of cards from their deck equal to their hand size.
Right. A little different from other games. Each player is going to have their own hand size. And in this case, Peter has 6, so he would draw the 6 cards, which I think you can barely see the top of these, according to Jeb's camera.
Yeah, just the top half. They can see the marble.
So, there's 6.
All right, and then you will resolve any mulligans, which is actually different in this game compared to some of the other LCG games.
That is very, well, I would say very different because...
You don't actually shuffle anything back in.
Right, you're
going to pick any number of cards in your hand that you don't want. You are going to discard them, and then you're going to draw back up to your hand size. So that's something to keep in mind because a bad thing happens when your hero deck runs out.
Right. Nothing good happens in this game when the villain deck runs out or the hero deck runs out.
Alright, and once all players have done that, the last thing to do is to resolve any character setup abilities that say like setup. And one example is T'Challa has a setup card, or his ability says during setup he gets to search his deck for a card. So if any of that's on the board,
I think he gets 2 cards, but it doesn't really matter. He gets he gets to do an extra step during setup. I don't know why I put these back on the deck. He still has a hand. I was just being stupid, I guess.
Well, it's because the setup is over. So
there you go.
Now we can actually start talking about how to play the game.
Okay, so mechanics of the game. I think what we're going to do for this one is Jeb's literally going to read each step on the card, and then we are going to try to give you as much information about cards and parts of cards and that step of the game, etc., as we can as we go along. And as we say in all of our videos, if something doesn't make sense, try to watch the first at least 10 minutes of gameplay, and usually, in our opinion, we think that things probably stick a little bit better, and you might be able to catch some stuff that didn't make sense because maybe we weren't very clear trying to describe it, because as you guys know, sometimes trying to describe a mechanic is not as easy as watching it.
Right. Okay, so I guess the main thing to know is that this takes place over a series of rounds, and a round consists of a player phase and a villain phase, and it goes in that order: player phase, villain phase, player phase, villain phase, until the game is over.
Oh, how does the game end, Jeb?
There are a couple ways the game ends, and by couple I mean more than 2. So one of the ways the game ends is if the heroes defeat the villain. So if the villain's health dial goes to 0. Except one thing you got to know is that when you're on stage 1 of the villain and it goes to 0, that does not defeat the villain.
No, because look, he gets pissed.
Yep, he moves on to his second phase. So it's only when the heroes defeat the second card of the villain is when the game ends, and it's a win for the heroes.
Right.
The villain wins on 2 conditions, I believe. One is if all heroes are defeated, and the other condition is if the main scheme of the villain says that there's a win condition. Like, for instance, Rhino says if there's scheme equal to, or no, threat equal to the maximum of that main scheme, he wins. And I think the villains, at least Ultron, I think his last card says that as well. It's just you kind of have to progress. So.
Right. Well, what Jeb's talking about is each of these schemes has a number up here, so it's probably just as good a time as any to talk about it. This one has 7 and then a people symbol. People symbol means number of players. So 7, 2 players, that means there's 14. So it's a multiplier, okay? That means that if this gets to 14 tokens in a 2-player game, Rhino wins. there's different ones with different levels. Jeb mentioned Ultron.
He's got 3 different.
He's got 3
levels.
different ones.
Yeah, Ultron's last thing will have a condition on how the game ends. So I assume all the schemes for all the villains, the very last one will tell you how the game ends.
Right.
So.
And since there's only one in this one, it tells you how to win. And in that one is if it gets 14, you win.
Yep. All right, so let's get on to the actual gameplay round, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is the player phase. So at the beginning of the player phase, you will take turns in player order. So starting with the first player and going clockwise, you are able to play cards.
So let's talk about playing cards. These are cards. Let's talk about card makeup.
Yep.
All right, so top left of the card is the cost of the card. Name of the card, kind of card, and a keyword for the card. This one happens to be shield. And then what the card does, plus if there's any specific bold words usually indicate some kind of something that you can do. In this case, it's an action. Probably the most important part of the card is down here, which is a resource. This resource is a, what is it, knowledge resource?
Molecular silence.
Oh my gosh. I forget what it's called. What is it? I thought it was right on the back.
Molecular science.
It's not molecular science. What is
It's
it?
mental.
Okay, that was close. So that's the mental resource. The resources on the card are very important. Just real quick. So there's an energy resource.
Lightning bolt.
There's a physical resource.
Fist.
And there's one more, which of course I can't find. It's a green star, which is a wild card.
Green star.
Right. Okay. So now you know the parts of the basic cards.
The last thing is in the bottom right, tells what...
oh yeah, this particular one tells what trait it is.
But also the color of the card kind of gives
it away. The gray ones actually say basic on it, I believe.
They do.
Or it has a picture of your character. So paying for a card in this game, so you need a number of resources. Remember, these are resources equal to the cost of the card. Don't get hung up on the type. That doesn't matter. Even though this has a mental resource down here, it's still any resource to get it into play. So as long as I discard 3 resources into my discard pile, 2 resources into my discard pile, I can play this card. Okay? That one, I don't have to spend any resources because it has a cost of 0. Just remember that even though the resources have types, anything can be used to pay for it unless the card specifically says otherwise. Most of the time, if it says otherwise, it's usually some kind of kicker bonus, at least so far. Okay? I mean, that doesn't mean they're not going to introduce cards that specifically require certain things. Alright, so that's paying for a card, and that is one of the harder concepts to grasp because everybody wants to associate the type with the cost, and that's not necessary. Jeb just pointed at me. He wants to interject something.
When you play a card, it depends on the type of card, what happens with it. So
that's true.
Events are the only ones that automatically resolve and then go to the discard.
Right.
All other cards will go in front of you or like around your hero.
Right.
So.
Okay, so the other parts of the card that you're only going to see on your hero card and allies are these are basic actions. And that word basic action is very important to remember because the basic actions are the only actions, unless otherwise stated, that cause your card to exhaust. Okay? Yes, exhaust is just like tap in this game. You know, we don't want to hurt Magic's feelings and use the word tap. That would be awful.
I think
right?
I've said that every time we play.
Okay, so this is the blue burst is called a thwart. The red burst is your attack. The hero card on the hero side has one more. It has a green burst, which is a defense, and on its alter ego side, they all have a yellow burst, which is a recovery. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about the hero card in a minute. Okay, so again, thwart and attack, we'll get into that, comes into play when we start attacking the villain. But remember, when you use these, this card is going to exhaust. Same with the hero. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is mostly only on allies, because I don't think there's any heroes that have that symbol under their basic
We
action.
haven't seen any yet.
Right. So
Right.
if they have like a little, it looks like a bullet hole type symbol underneath one of their basic actions, whenever they perform that, they're going to take a damage.
Right.
So Jessica Jones will take a damage if she does the thwart action or the attack action.
Right. Notice that your hero doesn't have those. So basically the concept of the game is like when you get an ally out, they're only staying for a minute.
Yeah.
So it's not as much looking at these guys as, I mean, you could thematically look at it as damage, but it's more like useful life, and that's kind of the way I like to look at it. It's like I'm helping for a little bit, then I gotta go do something else.
Right.
Even though they can take damage for you and things like that. It's kind of the concept of the game is so that you don't build up an army. It's more about Spidey than it is about Jessica Jones. And last but not least on this card is their health, and you obviously have the health dial for your hero, but they don't. So
I don't know if you mentioned it, but the star next to her name is unique.
yep. So Spider-Man's got a unique. Jessica Jones has got a unique,
And that is on the entire board.
Right.
So like I can only, if I put Jessica Jones down, any of my fellow players cannot put Jessica Jones down.
right. No, and Rhino has a unique, and Spider-Man has a unique, and I'm pretty sure all the allies, and so they don't want.
Right.
So if Jeb and I can construct a deck, like he said, and we both happen to have Jessica Jones in the deck, Jessica Jones can only be out one at a time.
Right.
It's just, this is not a new concept. If you're familiar with these games, Lord of the Rings and Arkham both have unique cards, and they can't be on the field at the same time.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you have an ally limit of 3.
And you have ally limit is free. Some of the other cards and the way they recommend setting them up would be allies kind of by your hero, and this is probably opposite of what you would look at it like. And then an upgrade would be under your hero, and then last but not least would be a support, which you can't see anymore, but that's in row 3, would be a support card. And that's how they work. And they stay in play until something gets rid of them.
Yeah, and I think some of them actually say there's a limit on how many can be out and stuff like that. So just pay attention to the wording on them.
And those little star symbols.
Yep. So that's pretty much playing a card.
Yep.
Next is trigger and request actions.
Okay, so lots and lots of cards have actions. We already described that these are basic actions. However, the basic actions are going to make you exhaust. There are cards, like I said, with actions. There are actions that can only be done in alter ego. There are actions that can only be done in hero. So pay attention to the wording of what the action says.
Yes, that is important.
Some actions will make you exhaust the card, but they will specifically say that. If it doesn't say that, then it doesn't exhaust.
Right.
When a hero is exhausted, doesn't mean he can't perform an action. He can't perform a basic action anymore. Doesn't mean he can't perform any other action.
The only other one he couldn't perform is one that
Makes him exhaust.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Exactly. So just keep that in mind when you're playing.
And then, well, the next thing is use basic action or basic attack, thwart, recover powers, which is what you just went over.
Just to reiterate that, so this is a recover action. So if I wanted to use it, I would exhaust Peter and I would use the recover action. If I was in Spider-Man form, I would use thwart I'd have to exhaust. If I wanted to use attack, I would have to exhaust. If I wanted to use defense, I would have to exhaust. And it is only one. So it's not like if I don't know why you would be thinking that, but if I exhaust, it's not like all three of those things go off. It's just you pick one and tell them what you're doing.
Yep. Another thing you can do is change your form, which is a limit of once per round.
Right. So on your turn, you can freely flip from Peter to Spider-Man or Spider-Man to Peter.
But
Okay?
only once.
Only one time unless you have a card that gets around the one-time rule. Important to keep in mind. A lot of people get hung up with, I'm exhausted. Can I still flip? Can I still flip, Jeb?
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Unless you've already flipped this turn.
Unless I've already flipped this turn. And notice that if I do that, like I could have, this has an ability that lets me get a resource. I could take advantage of getting that because all it says is gain a resource. It doesn't say I have to exhaust them or anything else. It says I get to use, once per round, I can gain a mental resource when I'm in Peter Parker Show. So I can take advantage of that, and then I can flip to Spider-Man, and I can take advantage of the ability that Spider-Man has. That is perfectly legal, even though I'm exhausted, okay? So that's important to remember, and if you're unexhausted, then you still get to use the basic things like we had talked about before.
And if you don't have any actions you can do on your turn after that, it's just end your turn.
Right.
Alright, so once Spider-Man ends his turn, it will go to the next player, and they'll do their entire turn, and then you keep doing that until all the heroes have gone once, and then after that, you are going to move to the second part of the player phase, and at this point, all players are simultaneously going to discard any cards from their hand that they don't want, draw up to their hand size, and then ready all of their exhausted cards.
Right. So, to reiterate everything that Jeb just said, and actually even going back to the previous phase just a little bit, this game is all about like playing and paying for cards. So it's not like you just play one and then that's it and do one action. So your hand could be pretty empty. So to elaborate on what Jeb said, you can get, if you have dead cards or you think you have dead cards, you can discard them. Pay attention to your hand size though. Notice that Peter Parker on this card, when he's Peter Parker, he gets to draw up to 6. When he's Spider-Man, he gets to draw up to 5. It's kind of a unique concept in this game is that because of the form that they're in, their stats change a little bit. Not their hit points, but their hand size often changes. Okay, so when you draw back up, make sure that you're paying attention to what your hand size actually is. Also, Jeb talked about readying all your cards. You ready, instead of at the end of your turn, you ready at the end of everybody's turn going into the villain phase. This is important because you need to be ready if you want to be able to use defense.
Right.
But you are not going to get a re-ready at the end of the villain phase, so keep that in mind.
And then the last thing that I didn't really specifically point out is when you're discarding the cards, if you have more than your hand limit, you have to discard down to your hand limit. So
he's talking about during the discard down phase, not while you're playing.
Right.
Okay.
It's just
being clear.
The way it's worded on here, it never really says that you have to discard down.
Right.
So,
but you do.
Yeah, it's in the rule book. So. Right. All right. So all the heroes have gone. They've all done their simultaneous cleanup stuff. So let's move on to the villain phase.
Okay.
So the very first thing that, please remember, because it affects your game if you forget this.
Yeah, and I don't know, Jeb and I really had a problem. I guess we were just so excited to fight the villain because we do it in almost every other game we play like this, but we kept forgetting this left and right.
Yep, so the first thing to do is place threat onto the main scheme.
All right.
Now, Mickey, how much threat do you place onto the main scheme at this point?
Okay, so the main scheme, how to read this card. This is the threat part of the card. This bottom square tells you how much it when it goes into play, how much it starts with. It's a 0. That's why you don't see anything on it. This is how much it gets at the beginning of the villain turn every single time. It has +1, and then it has that little player symbol. So since there's 2 of us, it gets 1 times 2. It gets 2. So we are going to put 2 right there.
All right. So once that's been placed, the next thing is the villain and each engaged minion will activate once per player in player order. So this depends on what form your hero is in, or I guess your character is in.
Right.
If it's in the hero form, the enemies are going to attack you. If it's in the alter ego form, the enemy is going to scheme.
Right. This is another concept that it takes a little bit of getting used to, because when you're strategizing, you got to remember that what he is going to do all depends on what form you are in. So right now, for Spider-Man, Rhino is attacking. If I was Peter Parker, he would be scheming. Think about this thematically. If the hero isn't out, the villain doesn't know.
He's not going to fight anything.
Well, he doesn't know who.
To fight. Yeah.
It's alter ego. He doesn't even know you're Spider-Man. So all he's doing is trying to advance what he's going about his business being a bad guy. However, when you're Spider-Man shows up, he's going to attack you, and that's the way to think about it.
Yep. So let's talk about how attacking works.
Okay.
So Spider-Man form. Rhino gets to attack him. Since Spider-Man is the first player, you're going to do it in player order. So starting with Spider-Man, Rhino attacks, so he has a base attack of
2.
Alright, is that all you get?
No, the villain gets to have a boost card every time they attack.
That doesn't sound fun.
It's not. So what happens is he deals himself 1 card off the counter deck, and he flips it over. Watch this be a bad example. No. And it's not. Alright, so what you do is you look at the bottom left corner of the card.
Yes, completely ignore everything
else. If a card says when revealed, you just don't. All you're looking for is the bottom left corner. And this happens to be landscape, but it's
bottom
the
right.
same. Is it right on the other ones?
Bottom right?
Oh, it's bottom left over here.
Oh, well, I think they want you to put it like that, right? To match up in the discard?
Oh, yeah, maybe they do.
I don't know. That's what I had.
Oh, that's a good... I never thought about that, Jeff. I just turned it landscape like I should read it. So it doesn't matter.
You were doing it the way that you could read it.
Okay, so flip the card over and you're looking at the bottom right of the card. Yes, I know this is a landscape card, but flip it like this. It'll always be in the bottom right, and we're looking for these symbols and how many there are. So there are...
from here, it looks like 2.
There are 2, Jeff.
Right.
So what do we do with those symbols?
Well, I wish we just throw them away, but
I
we
do
don't.
too.
We add them to the number, or the attack that he's already doing. So he has a base attack of 2, and he adds on 2.
His
so
boost gives him 2.
he is going to hit Peter Parker, or not Peter Parker, he's going to hit Spider-Man for 4 damage. So there's a couple things that can happen.
Right.
If this was any other hero, they would either take the damage or try to defend.
Right.
So if they took the damage, you can reduce his damage.
Okay, so scenario 1, Spider-Man just is like, yeah, I'll just get hit, and he goes down to 6.
Okay, so that's the simple way. No interactions. Next scenario, Rhino's attacking for 4, and Spider-Man wants to defend.
So at this point, Spider-Man can exhaust and use his defense value,
which is
3.
So it's an attack of 4, defending 3. 4 minus 3 is 1. So he just takes.
So he would only take 1. So he'd be at 9 instead if he defends.
Right. So the other thing that's kind of only special to Spider-Man right now is he has Spider Sense, and it is an interrupt.
Right.
And that says when the villain attacks Spider-Man, or when the villain initiates an attack, Spider-Man gets to draw 1 card.
Right.
So he actually gets to draw a card before any of the damage and stuff is resolved. Which is kind of key, because Mickey was talking about the backflip that could negate all the damage.
I was talking about that in the review, I think.
Well, Mickey will be talking about that in the future.
But anyways, the point that Jeb was making is that's an example of an interrupt card.
Yep.
So you got to kind of pay attention to the timing of things, and that card does say when he initiates attack. So as soon as he starts his attack phase, before anything else happens, Spider-Man gets a card, which could become useful to him during whatever's going to happen next.
And the other scenario would be is if Spider-Man or another hero or alter ego, I guess another player, has an ally out,
Right.
and they can send that ally to take that attack.
Actually, the hero can defend for him, too, as far as I know.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody else can defend for you, or you can use one of your allies to take the attack. Important thing to note, if there is an ally, I'm going to try to find one. Look at that. Alright, so if there was an ally and you decide to defend, the ally, it doesn't tap or anything because it doesn't have a defense mechanism. It just takes all the damage. Okay, there's no spillage unless a card specifically says that there's, I think they call it overrun in this game.
Yeah, overkill.
Overkill. So, in this case, he's swinging for 4. Mockingbird has 3 health. Even if Mockingbird only had 1 health left, sucks up all the damage and then gets discarded. Okay? Same thing if somebody else wanted to use their ally for you. Works the same way. I do believe, unless Jeb corrects me, that you can also defend with your hero for somebody else.
Yeah, I believe, because Black Panther's whole deal is protection. So.
Right. So, that's how the defense works, and that's how dealing damage works to anybody other than your own hero.
Right. All right, and now let's rewind and say that it's actually Peter Parker that's out and not Spider-Man.
Alright,
so it is the villain phase, and instead of attacking, he sees Peter Parker, and he's like, who is this guy? I don't care about him.
He walks on by and does what he does.
So he is going to scheme. So scheming, kind of similar to attacking. You look at the scheme value instead of the attack value.
It's 1.
So it's a base of 1.
And
when you hear the word base of 1, you know that something might add to it. So you're going to do a boost card.
Right. So he gets the boost no matter which one he's doing.
Yep.
And yeah, I just put the same card right back on top. And he has 2. So
1 plus 2 is
3.
Yep.
Except this time,
there's no defending.
He takes a token and he puts it on his scheme.
Yep.
Hence the word scheming.
Yep. All right. So let's just say there was a minion engaged with Peter Parker. So what would happen? So the Hydra Bomber is a minion, and he's engaged with Peter Parker, and it's the villain phase, and we're resolving the villain attacking or activating for each player. So Rhino is going to look, and he sees Peter Parker, so he's going to scheme first, and then the Hydra Bomber is going to scheme as well. So both the villain and the minions engaged with that character are going to do the same type of thing, either scheme or attack, but it is always villain before the minions.
And it's important to note that the minion does not get a boost card.
Right. If they did, I would cry.
Yeah, because the game is relatively difficult enough. And if that didn't make sense because we didn't show it during the attack phase, if it was Spider-Man, he would do the attack instead, and it would be an extra 1 damage.
Yeah. All right, so once you resolve the villain and any engaged minions activating for each player, the next thing is to deal an encounter card to each player.
By the way, these boost cards, as soon as you're done with them, they get discarded.
Right. So, each player is going to get an encounter card. So we just deal them out in player order. It's
important to deal them all out, too. And don't look at them until it's your turn. Only because of stuff that can happen on the card. And then you're going to find yourself trying to reset because you went, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that.
Right. So Each player is going to reveal and resolve their encounter cards in player order. So Peter Parker is first player, so he's going to reveal it.
Oh,
boy.
look. Good example. He got a side scheme.
So when you get a side scheme from this phase, it pretty much goes into play.
Alright, so it goes over underneath the main scheme. Notice that it has a square with a 2, so it automatically gets 2, and then we read the card, and it says, when revealed, place an additional 1 threat per person here. So, since it's me and Jeb, it's going to come in and start with that. This also has a symbol here that has plus a card, which is a hazard of this side scheme, and that one means that during the dealing of the encounter cards, we're going to deal 1 more. Not 1 to everybody, 1 more. So that means in a 2-player game, the first player is going to get 2 of the encounter cards dealt to them.
Yep.
Okay? So that's one thing that could happen. Let's look for something different. No?
Oh, I was going to say the Hydra Bomber could be... The minion is a different thing that can happen.
Oh, yeah.
So if that was the card that was dealt...
Right. So, if this card was dealt and I flipped it over, it's a minion. It just immediately engages me. Okay? Remember, we've already done all the attack and stuff, so this isn't doing anything until, well, except having these on it.
Yes,
that
is one thing to note. This plus a card does not affect this round because we've already done cards.
Right.
So.
And the minion isn't going to attack or scheme because we already did that. So it just sits in front of me engaged.
I think there's... Oh, were you going to talk about that?
Yeah, I was going to just... engaged in the other 2 games that Jeb and I have talked about, Lord of the Rings and Arkham, is different than in this game because Jeb can actually hit this guy without being engaged with it. The word engaged in this is just who he's going to attack or scheme against. Yeah. So it doesn't, Jeb doesn't have to pull him over to him, so to speak.
And there's no penalty if I attack him, and if I missed, I wouldn't hit Mickey or whatever.
I don't know if there is a miss in this, isn't there? So. Okay. Alright, so that's how a minion goes off. Another type of card is a treachery, and that basically, you're going to read the card. Most of them have a when revealed in alter ego, it tells you what to do, and when revealed as a hero, and it tells you what to do. Yep. A lot of the cards will have an effect, and if it can't go off, it'll tell you to surge. Surge means draw another one.
Alter ego, surge. Surge.
Then
give Rhino something.
Yeah. This one is give Rhino a tough status. So the status cards would put it on him, and it tells you what to do. And this one says the next time the character would take any amount of damage, discard this status card instead. So that's pretty self-explanatory. A couple things to note. Here's an example of one that says, if I would have flipped this during the deal phase, this says attached to Rhino. So this one gives him a +1 attack. So now his base attack is 3. The only way to get rid of it is for a hero action. Someone has to spend 3 physical resources. So there's an example of having to spend specific resources to do something. I'll back up just a little bit. Remember, if this was the boost card, you ignore this attached.
Yep.
Boost cards are just for that, and you would be able to avoid that because it gets discarded.
But if it's a revealed card,
you do what it says. If an obligation gets revealed during the dealing of the encounter cards, they all have a similar text that starts in bold. This one says, give to the Peter Parker player. So
if I was the one who drew that or
Right.
got dealt that threat card, it actually doesn't affect me.
Right.
It goes straight over to Peter Parker.
straight over, and they're the ones that have to make the decision about this card. Most of them have you exhausting your player card. It's kind of what they want to force you to do. You guys can read them for yourself. They're very interesting.
Yeah, it seems like there's an option to get it out of the game or an option to it. You don't exhaust, but it stays in the game. So,
And then last but not least,
This is
card.
the bad one.
This is the bad one. Shadows of the Past is when revealed, reveal your set-aside nemesis. So if the Spider-Man player drew this card, they would have to take this. I'm going to get this stuff out of the way because this is what's happening right now. They would have to put the side scheme into play. Notice this one has 3 times the number of players. They're a little worse.
and it has a win revealed ability too,
Right.
and a win defeated.
Each
so.
player places a random card from their hand face down here, so until that's gone, you're screwed.
So he stole a card from everybody.
And then also, Vulture comes to pick on you. It immediately engages with you, and they're not easy. And they do stuff. He has a quick strike. After this minion engages a hero, it just attacks.
Oh, so he gets a free 3
Free
attack.
attack.
Yep.
Right. And then the remainder of the cards get shuffled into the encounter deck, and they get played. The game gets played with them for the rest of the time, unless
Yep.
the card gets trashed.
And same thing with the side scheme. If
Yep.
you get rid of it or Vulture, it
It's
goes
going
to
into the discard pile. So they're kind of they stay in the game to haunt you.
And that Shadows of the Past card does not go out of the game, so it can come back and another player can have all their stuff come in.
Thank goodness right now there's only one of them.
Right.
So you do have a chance to see it and then not have to deal with it.
So once a player reveals their threat card, they resolve it, and then the next player does the same thing until there's no more threat cards to reveal. And then the last thing on the villain phase is it's kind of like a breather, because it's no more bad stuff. It's just past the first player token. So Peter Parker is no longer first player. It'll go to the next. And then that's the end of the villain phase, and we're back to the player phase. And since we're in the player phase, there are the basic actions which we need to talk to you about now, since you kind of know what's on the board.
Yeah, what's on the board. Keep in mind that when we were talking about defense, if we had actually used the defense, right now this card would still be exhausted.
Right.
So we
And you'd also
mentioned
be Spider-Man too,
right.
but whatever.
It would be. We only point that out because from a strategic point it makes a difference.
Yeah, because if you go into your turn and you're already exhausted, then
you can't do any of the basic actions,
Right.
which is what we're going to talk about now. So now that there's some stuff on the board, Rhino's powered up. This guy's actually got some scheme tokens or threat tokens, whatever you want to call them. Now the basic abilities are even more useful. So, as a basic action, Spider-Man can do what they call thwart. Your minions also have the thwart ability also. So I can exhaust Spider-Man and I can thwart for 1, and what thwart means is you take a threat token off the main scheme. And that is the main way that you control how high this is getting, because if you put 2 and 2 together, you realize that just the beginning of his turn can wreck your day real quick with the scheme tokens going on when he schemes against you.
And there's other cards in your hero deck that'll also help with that as well. But yes, having an inherent way to reduce the threat is helpful.
Exactly. The
attack basic action.
Right. The attack basic action, and notice that we keep saying basic because this is the only action that you have to pay the exhaust with. So that is a 2. So Rhino just literally gets hit for 2, and you reduce the dial.
Yep. If you have minions engaged with you, you can still hit Rhino, but there are some minions that will have an ability that will say you have to destroy them before you can...
Right, they have the guard ability.
That's the word, yeah, guard.
Yeah.
So
just pay attention to the cards. They're all pretty self-explanatory. There's also a side scheme that'll come out that says that has a hazard that says you can't take anything off of this until you get rid of it.
That one is called Crisis.
It's called the Crisis Hazard. So that's how you attack. Now, if you're in your alter ego form, you have the recovery, and the recovery on all your heroes is basically a built-in get your life back type of thing. So I can exhaust and I can gain 3 hit points back, not to go over your starting hit points.
Right.
So, well, I left it at 9, but say I was... That at one point we showed you that I took 4, so I could go back up to 9.
And if you were at 9, you would just go up to
10. Exactly. So those are the basic actions. We can't stress enough, because so many people get confused, that you can still do other actions while you're exhausted. Right. You just can't do the basic ones.
2 things left to talk about.
Okay.
What happens when you run out of a player deck?
Oh, piss.
And
is that what you do?
Yeah, that's the easiest thing to do. So, unlike other games, which if your deck is empty and you need to draw a card, that's when you would reshuffle. This game is the second that your hero deck is empty.
You do, if you're in the middle of drawing, you do finish.
Yep. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
You will shuffle your discard, make your hero deck with that, and then what's the bad thing?
Then you immediately have to draw an encounter card and reveal it.
Yep.
So just like the deal phase, you have to flip this and you have to do what it says.
Yep.
That's what happens when the hero deck runs out.
And then this is the one that Mickey really loves.
I hate this.
What happens when the encounter deck runs out?
Okay, so
or the villain deck, I guess.
If this deck all goes to the discard pile and he's empty.
And this also is the second that it is empty.
Yep. You reshuffle it, and then, woo, you get a +1 over here. So now...
An acceleration token.
An acceleration token. So now at the beginning of the villain phase, he gets to put on, in a 2-player game, he gets to put on 3 every time instead of 2 every time.
Oh, and guess what? If that deck runs out again within the same game...
Another acceleration token!
Yep, so it just gets worse and worse.
I don't know how that would happen.
It'd probably in one of the long stretched out ones.
I guess. I mean, I think we were getting kind of close in a 4-player game. I don't think you would see 2 of those in a 2-player game.
Oh, no, probably not.
You would have to... I don't know, the healing and back and forth have to be so just right, spot on. I don't think you'd see that, but they sure gave you plenty. Yep. They gave you like 5 of them. If you were a +5 on that, forget it.
Yeah. So I think that covers everything. It's pretty much like we said earlier. Heroes go, then the villains go, and back and forth until somebody wins.
Right. Just to recap, the hardest concepts for people to remember are those resources that we talked about. Spending resources on cards is not dependent on the type of resource. Okay? The flipping of the hero has nothing to do with the state of the hero. Flipping the hero can happen when you're exhausted or when you're readied. Except for basic actions, other actions can still be performed even when you're exhausted, unless the card that you are using says you need to exhaust the hero, and you can't. And the
beginning of the villain phase.
Beginning of the villain phase, do not forget to put the threat tokens onto the main scheme during the attack and or scheming phase of the villain's turn. Don't forget to deal the boost card. remember that the boost card is just looking for those little red symbols down in the corner to boost either the thwart or either the scheme or the attack. It has nothing to do with the words on the card, and then it is immediately discarded. However, don't forget to do the dealing of the encounter cards after that step, and those are the ones that one at a time will be revealed. We suggest that you don't look at them early because of things like surge and etc., that could cause somebody to have to rewind because you got a card that you shouldn't have, or etc.,
The last thing I looked up really quick, because we haven't encountered it yet,
Yes.
is when a player gets eliminated. If you have an encounter card that has been dealt to you face down, it, like for some reason you were eliminated then, it would get discarded. You take all of your cards that's on your hero, in your hand, everything goes to the discard. Any minions that are engaged with you engage the next player in clockwise order.
Okay.
So the minions will stay on the board.
Okay.
But everything else is gone. So your allies aren't going to stay out. So
Good to know, because that's actually one thing that we've played a few times, but we haven't run into. We just pretty much either got hammered by the scheme,
yeah,
or we won. That's kind of the way it went, and not handily won either. Like skin of our teeth won.
Yep.
So, anyways. Hopefully that gives you all the basic mechanics, and hopefully we were able to drive home some of the things that we found and dealing with other people found that seemed to be the sticking points with this particular game. And again, like we always say, if there were things that you didn't understand, watch us play for about 10 to 15 minutes, and you should see the majority of aspects that arise in the game, and then you can be like, oh, okay, I get it now. Even better, watch the whole thing and, tell your friends and, make us famous. Alright, so I think that's it. So we'll be back in just a minute with
two-player game
Ultron. Against Ultron, who is the most difficult villain in the box. There is a more difficult... I already forgot the name of them.
Me too. It's not Encounter. It's
yeah, it is. Encounter set.
Oh, it is.
There is a more difficult encounter set that you can put with Ultron, other than the one that they tell you to use, which we are not going to do. But I think you'll see that Ultron is pretty well equipped all by himself.
We're not ready to go past that.
All right. Well, hopefully that helped you guys, and we'll see you in just a minute.